Hi everyone, it's me, Arielle, and it's Wednesday Warriors, and this week I'm going to be talking about eating disorders and psychosis, for example, schizophrenia. We are looking at comorbidity of eating disorders with other diagnoses, and last week I talked about self-harm and depression in relation to eating disorders. Strictly speaking, eating disorders and psychosis together it's a very little researched topic. By that I mean that there hasn't been a lot of investigation into eating disorders and psychosis. It doesn't mean that it doesn't occur, because certainly it does. It's just an area that where the research has been lacking. So I was able to find some things in order to discuss this topic today. I think it's important to point out that someone who is dealing with an eating disorder obviously is going to experience a number of different things, and a person who is struggling with a psychosis disorder is going to experience a number of different things. Together, that person may be experiencing combined symptoms, and what's more than that, every single person is an individual. Every single person is different, and their experiences with the same disorder is not always going to be the same. So it's very hard to make comparisons, and it's very hard for me to tell you this is what you will experience if you are suffering from psychosis and an eating disorder, because as we all know, there are many different kinds of eating disorders. There are many different forms of psychosis as well, and when you put those two together, it doesn't just make one recipe of a person, and that's the way it is if they're struggling with an eating disorder and psychosis. Eating disorders have been linked a lot to anxiety and to mood disorders. Sometimes eating disorders have even been linked to personality disorders, and there are a number of different personality disorders. We are going to talk about that in later weeks, so I don't want to delve into that at all. Focusing on eating disorders and psychosis, there's not really a lot out there about this. Symptoms of psychosis may be seen in someone presenting with any kind of an eating disorder, but that doesn't mean that they are schizophrenic. It just means that they have an eating disorder and they are presenting some symptoms. It would be more logical to assume that the eating disorder is bringing out certain symptoms or traits, feelings, emotions, behaviors, than that a person is schizophrenic and then also having an eating disorder. I don't think it is very common. From all of the research that I have done, which has not been much, but from what I've gathered from the things that I've read and learned, comorbidity of eating disorders and schizophrenia is not very common. I've also read some things that suggest that an eating disorder may actually be a defense against psychosis. So for someone who is presenting with psychotic symptoms, they may actually be using their eating disorder as sort of a mechanism to either mask the psychosis or to push it away. I keep saying this word psychosis, and maybe you aren't exactly sure what I mean when I'm referring to psychosis. So I wanted to give you the definition. Psychosis basically means an abnormal condition of the mind. So as you can see, many mental health diagnoses are an abnormal condition of the mind. And I think that's where it becomes tricky to diagnose true psychosis, true schizophrenia, for example. It's a very generic term. The word psychosis encompasses a lot of different disorders. For example, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, Lewy body's dementia, even disorders like that are more considered diseases are a manifestation of psychosis. Psychosis usually is referring partially to hallucinations, which means that you are seeing things or hearing things that are not there. You're basically perceiving something around you that does not exist. Delusions, on the other hand, doesn't mean that you're seeing or hearing things. It means that you have false ideas and thoughts and beliefs about something. So if you think that, for example, everyone is trying to kill you. That would be a paranoid delusion. You're not seeing people that aren't there. You're not hearing people that are not there, but you are under the distinct, untrue belief that people are trying to kill you. That is a very generic example, but it does really drive home the point that delusions and hallucinations are very different, and some people get them confused. I think a lot of the time when psychosis is related to eating disorders, it's because eating disorders are often not based in reality. For example, someone with anorexia nervosa who doesn't think that they are thin and thinks that they are fat when in reality they're underweight. A lot of people would classify that as psychotic reasoning, psychotic behavior, not based in reality. Eating disorders can be related to what some would call delusions, and schizophrenia also clearly involves delusions. So depending upon the practitioner, the professional who is diagnosing, they may be apt to diagnose someone with a psychotic disorder when really they are just not familiar enough with eating disorder traits and behaviors. And it might be very difficult to recognize schizophrenia in patients with eating disorders associated to delusional ideas and distorted cognitions. I did find a statistic that the prevalence of schizophrenia in samples of patients with eating disorders is generally below 10%, but reaches 35% in males, which I didn't know prior to doing this research to give you some more information on this video. So then I just explained psychosis, and schizophrenia, one of the many psychotic disorders, usually means that people can't tell the difference always between what's real and what is not real. It also means that they can't always think logically. It might seem at times that they have a learning disability simply because they don't behave normally in social situations. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, but if you watch that movie, he was diagnosed, the man in the movie, the character, was actually based off of a real life individual, and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he has delusions, and he also has hallucinations, and they do a really great job of explaining what it's like in that movie to live with schizophrenia. Now, I'm not schizophrenic, so I don't want to speak for anyone who does have that disorder and did not appreciate the movie or feel that it portrays it well. But I do think for people who do not experience that disorder, that it gives you an eye into what it really is like and how real it really is when you're living a life that is not based on reality, but you don't know it. So I think where we get into some shaky ground is when people can say that individuals who are not eating the right amounts or who think that they're fat when they're not, are very obsessed with their bodies, or, for example, think that eating a piece of bread is going to make them gain 5 pounds, that you can see where they would think that that's a delusion, because in a way it is. They are believing in something that is not true. It's not based in reality. If you eat a piece of bread, you will not gain 5 pounds. It is not true. But some people have such a fear about eating specific things or counting calories or what a number on a scale says that it becomes a delusional sort of ritual for them. Delusional thoughts and behaviors happen, and there can be a lot of similarities between schizophrenia, for example, and behaviors usually associated with anorexia nervosa, but also with other eating disorders as well. But just because some similarities exist does not usually mean that someone suffers from both a psychotic disorder and an eating disorder. I think most of the time it is true that the two are separate. So I am tailoring this video to show the differences between the two and what true psychosis really is. Certainly there are going to be people out there who have both an eating disorder and a psychotic disorder, but the two still have to be treated separately. They are so all-encompassing in themselves, even where there are links, they must be treated separately. I hope you're having a wonderful week out there, and I will see you next time.